You're listening to the Flex Success podcast, where we teach you how to be less shit.
I'm your co-host Lizzie, and this is Dean. We'll be covering all topics relating to health, fitness, and bodybuilding.
Join us as we use our in-the-trenches experience and up-to-date science to provide you with information that you can actually use.
If you like what we do, be sure to give us a like, follow, share, and tag us on social media.
Welcome back, everybody, to this month's Flex Success podcast. I'm joined by Mr. George, mate. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. It's been a while since I've been on.
But mate, any quick little recap? I know we've had, man, there's actually a lot to recap, but we both had a really successful season C in Australia. I was like super happy with how the team went there. That was really cool. And then you've also had Blake, jump in another pro show, did exceptionally well. And then a new addition to the pro league as well.
It's been very full on, dude. I feel like the seasons for us just keep kind of compiling on and getting slightly better every time, whether a collection of whether it's placings or just even personal gratitude from the work that I feel I'm doing. It seems to keep just getting better and better and kind of more bigger in gravity, which is cool. Blake had a near miss twice this year. We've gone for 2 shows and he's lost to the same guy twice, which is a bit of a kick in the teeth. But I can't be mad about the progress that he's made in such a short time. He's a bit of an interesting specimen. I've said that kind of the highlight of genetics in bodybuilding does really come back down to these little moments in time where you go, Blake, you shouldn't have been able to put 3 kg of stage weight on and been in better condition in such a short time frame, dude. Logistically, like the human body doesn't normally do that. So on less PEDs, like we're always refining him back. It just, it's pretty cool to witness and watch the level of human genetics and what they can truly achieve. But yeah, sadly just missed. He last year he qualified for the O on points, and we was kind of like I'm in an R in over. This year's O just gone. Should we have done it? Should we have gone and done it? And I'm kind of kicking myself a little bit, bro. I wish we had. I kind of wish we had. Because the guy who won, Blake beat last year and has put a good 5 kgs worth of visual size on top of that look. So it's kind of like, I wish he'd gone. We might do next year. Who knows? And then recently this weekend, I feel like a very nice story has come together for Flex in a recent pro card. It was just a very heartwarming, wholesome moment for me. And Dashini, shout out to Dashini if you do watch this, and massive congratulations and welcome to the Pro League. She won her natural pro card in a figure comp at the South Korea Pro Qualifier just this weekend gone. And it was a very interesting full circle moment because Dashini's come through like every step of her journey from Gen Pop to athlete to now pro with a Flex coach for substantial time frame in that journey as well. Like Liz with her before I was even at Flex, so it was a Gen Pop teaching her the foundations of general nutrition, training, supplementation. Chelsea taking her that next step as an athlete, and then my small part of the end here coming on, taking her into the pro league. Like it's a really cool thing. Such a cool thing.
I would actually love to see her start. I remember seeing some of her starting pictures to her current ones, and it's just wild, man, the progress. And like you said, like it's been. Man, I couldn't even tell you how long ago that would have been. Like Chelsea was on board for 4 or 5 years, So, and then prior to that, Liz. So like Darshini's like a 6 and 7 year veteran of Flex, It's just super cool. But congratulations, Darshini. It's very, very awesome. And it's cool now to also have that availability even in the IFB Pro League for naturals to compete. So,
It's awesome. We'll see how that goes. We haven't had the conversation yet as to what's next, but I know she's keen for some more progression, so it would be exciting either way.
Yeah. Just another period of time that she'll just continue doing what she's doing, I get the vibe that she is just an implementer, like it just gets the stuff done. And that's why she's also, and probably being pretty process focused, given the amount of time that she spent with us, and it's just a testament to that. You do the daily things, which turn into the weekly things, and then the monthly things become a yearly thing. And then all of a sudden you're like significantly different to what you were,
Completely.
I love looking at the starting and the finishing, even of people that I otherwise thought were really good when they started. When Cam George came to me, I was like, oh, he's good. I look back at him now and I'm like, and even he will say, like, what did you see in me? Ryan Ackerman, another one. Like what happened, man? Like, you sure that you should have taken me on? I was like, man, proofs of the pudding, So it was all very exciting.
We see things that they don't.
Yeah. But mate, you said before that Blake is, they're genetically elite. And I think one thing I've noticed over my years with coaching is that like bodybuilding to me seems to be about harmony. It's like, even with Ethan at the moment in the phase that we're currently with him, it's like the least amount that he's ever used, and it's the best that he's ever looked with the most amount of muscle he's ever had, and now probably this week entering into the best condition he's ever been in. And for me, it's just like this: when you find the harmony of like enough of everything, fuck, it makes life easier. Instead of pushing the needle in every direction. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say that's definitely one that's noticeably changed over me in the years, is that how much you're willing to move the needle or how far you're willing to meet someone with that needle push.
Mm.
Usually, lo and behold, evidence always seems to pull it back down over the course of years.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's like I think most people fear the too little being too little. And also, I think like this comes down to experience too, though, man. Like you've been in the game now a fairly long time. I've been in it a fairly long time, whereby you start to realize, like, because the fear of the unknown, I think, is what gets a lot of people. Like, maybe if I take more, I get more. But also, like, maybe if I take less, I get less. And there's this fear. And then you have the opportunity to test it for one reason or another. And then you're like, oh, okay. Like, it's actually not that bad, It's like people who don't train for 4 weeks, like, oh, I came back from no training and I'm still pretty good. Talk about the fucking genetically elite. Have you seen Danny recently put up any pictures since he had a car accident and was in a boot for 3 months and his quads are still fucking bigger than everyone's? Dude, he lost like no calf mass. I'm like, what happened? Why? How?
It doesn't make plausible sense. There should be atrophy, at least short term.
Dude, I was like, man, like, and like we actually didn't even do a hell of a lot because we were like really cautious. Like he didn't really have him doing like any weird occlusion protocols or anything. It was like, man, be in the boot and just like let your body recover. Because he's still getting fucking hematomas in his face, man. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So
did you have any unilateral opposite side work? So like right leg?
He was doing that stuff on his own, yeah, like just little bits and pieces. It was actually a really good period for him just to sort of step back from, again, like being a really intense bodybuilder for like the last few years and just be like, now he's chafing at the bit, So like this week's officially week 1. And we're going to try and make him monstrous. So
I'd imagine the injury probably had a bit of a setback for him because his momentum was in everything, was just fucking like a peak, competing clients, like fucking everything top of the fucking level of expectation and parameters.
Yeah, and his wife got a pro card, and then they were going to compete together, and then there's a car accident. And it was fuck me, and it was like what, like man, he was peeled for 4 months, 3 months straight, and. The cool thing for him, though, is it's the same as this PD talk we just had. It's the recognition of what is now possible for him and what he's capable of. It's confirmation that he could be as big as he wanted to or as lean as he wants to be. It's just a matter of like getting all your ducks in a row,
Yeah.
But the Blake thing triggered is for me because it's like a nice segue, I think, into what we're going to talk about today, which is just like maximizing the post-show rebound, if we could call it that, or maybe even the approach that we take individually. In that, because obviously Blake must be a little bit of the genetically elite, like you said, in the rebound phase, if you can get tissue on in less than optimal time. So it's kind of a pertinent discussion. So
absolutely, dude. Yeah, the post-show masses for me. Now, I think we've had this conversation before, Dean, in like where we perhaps maybe sit. Maybe that's changed on the either or part in the last time since we had this discussion. But I definitely find myself leveraging post-show masses a lot more with my clients than I'd maybe say you do. I think personally that comes back down to the demographic, I guess, of like younger males and younger kids that I'm getting come into my space that are earlier on in their career that maybe see these lucrative phases as a bit more exciting than maybe someone with experience.
Less patience.
Yeah, less patience. Yeah, absolutely the right way to put it. But I am, as long as it's set up in what I believe to be the appropriate manner, and that starts with the prep and what has happened before rather than what's right and present now, then I do believe it can be an awesome opportunity to get at least a good couple of months headway on your off season. I think in hindsight, to throw just a statement here before we dive into the nitty gritty, I'd also say that I don't necessarily think a recovery phase and then off season provides bad results either. I think there's different rebounds and different looks at different stages, and the equivalent of what you get on here at this time frame compared to recovery post show kind of off seasony look, probably somewhat similar. It's just the time frame from A to B.
Yeah. So if you were just to put a number on it, would you say that your rebound starts day one post show, or does it start after a delayed period?
My rebound is within the first week starting.
Yeah. So yours is immediate.
Yeah.
I think the only place that you and I probably differ in the rebound concept is a slight delay. Like mine might be week 5. So 4 weeks,
that's
4 weeks recovery. Of a period of doing some stuff. It is recovery, exactly right. but it is usually dependent upon like whether or not they've gotten themselves out of the dieting condition, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm like, maybe I'll start off with this. Like traditionally, I don't even know what the traditional approach, actually, you know what? The traditional approach back in the day, like we're talking 15 years, 20 years ago, was just to go straight in. Like
Yeah.
you're being dieting, eat as much food and get big again, you know?
Mhm.
So it was very much like the post-show rebound. I don't really know what the demographic of PED users did a hell of a lot back then. It wasn't something that I was really into, but even in the natural space, that was kind of the approach. Then it shifted into this whole like very slow reverse approach, which was, you know, kind of pioneered by Lane Norton. And it was good in that there was a lot of education around like metabolic maladaptation to the dieting process or the dieting condition. So, you know, like you have reduced metabolic function, you do have dysregulation in sleep, you do have dysregulated appetite, all these sorts of things do exist. But there was this concept that you could build metabolic performance with very slow, like reintroductions of food. And realistically, what we ended up just having for a period of time was people that were in just a slightly smaller deficit for 6 months.
Yeah.
You know, linearly, they were in a 1,000 calorie deficit, then a 900 calorie deficit, then an 800 calorie deficit. And of course, they didn't get like fatter. So they thought they were building metabolic capacity. But like, I just think there was a delayed period to the fat accumulation because it took them so long to get into the surplus. Which is crazy when you actually think about like what it means to be a natural bodybuilder and the slowness of muscle growth and the caloric position you need to be in. Like it was actually probably the worst possible scenario you could have put yourself in. Whereas if you're a gear user, you can jog on some muscle and still be in a deficit. So like,
Absolutely.
how
You still
unfortunate.
have a large degree of the system that is supporting the muscle growth going on is typically incredibly suppressed and in like female spaces completely shut off in most cases. So the that kind of post-show window for me is with a natural that has gone through hypothalamic pituitary suppression is there's only one answer. It's you're recovering and you're recovering with progressive fat gain to achieve homeostasis again. Like I do personally think there is a black and white model in most cases in that space now where we have to do the right thing for health. But
Mm.
once you add pets in the mix,
Yeah, it's
a large
different.
degree of that leverage to drive anabolism that we didn't have is now very much supportive in aggressive numbers. So the opportunity to add muscle when you've been dieting for so long, incredibly insulin sensitive, and realistically, another parameter would be like that training conversation. The last 3 to 5 weeks of prep training can sometimes be reduction in RIR, coming back tapering, deload-esque style peak weeks, and pulling back enough that joint fatigue, ligament, tendon, accumulation of stress might actually be in an appropriate position to say, hey, you know what, you're actually quite fresh.
Mm.
As long as the rules of the prep that we have aligned within pharmaceutical use, what deployments we may be playing on peak week, what other drugs may have been used, as long as their organ function and blood work is pretty clear, apart from some ones that we would expect to be slightly out due to normal prep considerations that would be adaptable, training fatigue in a good spot, drugs can stay high, then we're good to go. It sounds like the perfect scenario to potentially get a lot of muscle on. Absolutely sounds great from an insulin sensitivity part. The thing that I think the old school bodybuilders very much did a lot of that was a problem is adipocyte hyperplasia. That
Mm.
risk factor in the post-comp window for those listening is the addition of new fat cells. And this is the big thing for me as to why you have to get it right. And if you're not in the right position to even do a post-show mass, you're gonna get fat, but it's not old fat. It's not you refilling fat stores. Your body could cross into a position where it sees it adequate and appropriate to store new fat. And new cells, you can't get rid of fat cells. You can go and get lipo done, you can get them removed, but your body's going to replace them. But the minute you're
Mm.
in a surplus sufficient, it's going to replace those cells. So that's a process we've got to be very meticulous on.
Yeah. That is yeah, and I mean that is largely representative of or a response to significant overfeeding of caloric intake. So like that's actually fairly easy to eradicate if you do this in a manner that is good. So like all the things you said there is essentially like all of my considerations, right? Like there's if an individual gets to the end of a prep, the expectation would be that there's going to be some dysregulation of sleep. I don't think that's typically eradicated or minimized for a lot of people. Appetite drive is still going to be relatively high for most people, right? There is going to be maybe a consideration for metabolic dysregulation, depending on if you've used exogenous thyroid. So maybe there isn't, you know. There certainly is increased insulin sensitivity, that's undeniable, but there is also increased sensitivity to lipogenesis, especially in the hyperplasia front, like you mentioned, which is very risky. The other ones for me would be like a decreased recovery capacity that someone has to be concerned with from their training, but it's possible that they may actually be in a good spot because, like you said, Usually training volume is going to come down, RIR is going to come down. So there's usually like less being done. So they may be physically in a pretty good position. And then the other one you mentioned is like isolated liver enzyme escalation, which is fairly easy to manage. Not a problem at all. So like if they're all of the things that I deem to be the things that need fixing, if they're all okay within week 2, then for me it's really just a question of like, when do we start? And then it would be, okay, these are some somewhat subjective and objective measures, and then it would be blood work. And then if blood work is good because of the liver enzymes and all the rest of it, there's no reason why I wouldn't say, hey, let's go tomorrow. So it really just depends on all of those things as to whether or not I think the immediate mass is appropriate versus the 4-week, the 6-week, the 8-week, and the 10-week. And those the elongation of the starting period for that is all a response to whether or not those factors that we just mentioned are in a good spot or a bad spot. The only thing I would say as a caveat to this is I think people can get caught thinking that they feel great because it's just become their new norm because they've been in such a fucked up state for so long. So like, they're like, my energy is good, boss, and I am good. I'm like, yeah, but you have very like quick, like reactive motivation coming out the back end of a prep where you haven't really looked internally and gone, you know what, I'm still pretty fucked up. So I like a slight delay. Unless somebody is actually like in a really bad spot, then I would immediately shift because I want to get them out of the bad spot faster. But again, this would probably be in the absence of a push and probably more of a, we need to calm the farm for a little bit, So yeah, like typically, in this period, so like priority number 1 for me is like, reverse the dieting conditions if they're existing to a significant degree, or at least like dampen them. And then it's just a setup phase for me. Like the setup phase for me is usually just exactly that. It's like getting people back to like baseline training volume that's the least amount possible, trying to get yourself as strong as possible, making sure that niggles are eradicated so we actually have the opportunity to push on for 3 more months or 4 more months, make sure bloods are good, make sure food and appetite's not crazy high, try and find roughly where we think maintenance is, and then it's go time. So
but yeah, I think the prerequisite at the start of that for me, as Blake is a good example, his prep was 6.5 weeks long. It was very aggressive. Yes, there's still a degree of fatigue, but even in, we spoke about this the whole way through because we're going to change our prep approach now tremendously compared to how we normally manipulate it. Even though he was tired, even though he was stressed, he felt so much fresher than he had in previous points. So already that's a green tick for me to know that psychologically and physiologically, at least just on the surface, he's in an appropriate position to consider keeping things where they are and just getting back to work. So if I have someone who I know is doing a 30-week prep, there's a good chance in the back of my head that it's unlikely, unless those positions are perfectly met, this person's going to be continuing to mass. Because the point that people often forget is, like you said about fatigue, I don't think they have a good perception of where their fatigue is. And I think bodybuilders, as a generalization, are a little bit skewed on that perception for most of the, especially the hardcore.
A little bit. A lot bit.
They could do some things, bro, and they're like, yeah, I'm fine, bro. And you're looking at them thinking, yeah, well, every other biological marker's telling me you're not. So let's maybe hold back. And if that's in the good position to continue on, you're fine to press out. And if they're doing a 30-week prep and they're not, I'm usually lenient way more to that recovery phase. So that kind of buffer window you give, if I feel that I need to give a buffer to someone, no point doing a post-show mass. In my opinion, I would rather just say, right, if we are going to have to wait a couple of weeks, we might as well just get this recovery done and get you in the off season.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds to me it's mainly just a delay. It's not, yeah. And like in the past, man, I probably was a little bit more hard and fast, a little bit more, not hard and fast, hard on my, I want you to go through a significant recovery period. And what I found was like probably 50 to 60 to 70% of the way through it, it was a matter of like why are we here? And like, why am I waiting 4 more weeks? Yeah. Everything points in the direction that this person's okay. Or even the only reason why it hasn't been is when there's just been timeline issues for people. So this is one actually thing that will change it, is like, what is the intention of the individual moving to the next phase after this? Like if you're an older individual who has limited time to compete, maybe we want to get in and get out quicker in all of these phases so they can get back on stage. Do I have a pro guy that's going to compete again in 30 weeks? Well, I'm not going to make him recover for 12 weeks to then grow for 4 weeks to then prep for 4 weeks. Like I know the math doesn't work out
I
there.
was going to say, what for you as a question, Dean, with your demographic into the pro ranks now, and observationally from the outside looking in and starting to see a few pros on my team now looking at shows. The structure for that show schedule is different to the amateurs, and where we just have to pick these two opportunities. We prep for those two opportunities in Australia. That's that. Do you find that post show window now is different for you with those athletes comparatively based on the season, like with Daniil, because he did multiple shows in that run the
Mm.
last
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly the question is, all right, well, if we were to compete again, when do we ideally do that? So it's the same thing. It's just that most of the time, like so far, I've been in the case where shows are not out outside of like doing things like New York Pro, Pittsburgh Pro, the Olympia, they're always like pretty much the same time. There's a lot of other shows, and then depending on the division, 212. Classic, I basically can just prep someone whenever I want to. Because the shows are crazy, man. The amount of shows that are available. 212, like with Cam, I have to be a little bit, and like Aaron, I'm gonna have to be a little bit more selective. So what I found with actually for me them is like I'm doing these massing phases with these mini cut phases, and sometimes the mini cut phases are actually getting them to within striking distance of prep, so that then I can mass them out very quickly from the mini cut and then get them straight back into a prep if I have to. So like Aaron's going to probably be an example of this now. We're going to start dieting for him next week with the idea that maybe we might compete somewhere around May next year. But I'm gonna diet him down to pretty good condition, and then I'm gonna rebound the fuck out of him for like 6 to 8 weeks, and then we're gonna know by then what's available, and then it might only be a 6 week prep, you know.
yeah.
But I've never prepped Aaron either, so I don't really know how he responds. But I've seen him from afar, and I know that he gets lean fast, you know. Um,
That's a very interesting setup of approach for a timeline for an individual psychology. That kind of stop start, like get loads of work done early, then kind of go opposite in direction before we come back down again. I'd
yeah,
imagine with the pros, you're dealing with a level of people whose mindsets are very aligned to it doesn't really matter what phase they're in. It's bodybuilding, just get on with it and crack on. I've taken approaches like that similar with clients, like when they might be a little bit too far gone in their condition for where they want to be. Okay, cool. We'll split this up into two phases. We'll do phase one of prep, phase two of prep with a rebound mass in the middle to try and give you a bit of breathing time, like a big diet break. The second part for the amateur very rarely follows suit. I just feel like they don't have that understanding. They're still very associated in sort of a black and white demographic to off-season prep are these two very individual things when by virtue they're the same of the flip side of the
mm,
same coin. It's just bodybuilding in one direction or the other. So they have a hard time getting that psychology back into the like 6 week last prep. They can't get that bit off. That's where the
yeah.
food start. That's where the problems start to arise.
Do you find that the amateur guys also find it difficult to commit to the 6 to 8 week mass in the middle, in that it's like counterintuitive to they think that they're in prep?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's an interesting dynamic because you might diet someone for 18 weeks in total. So then you do this pre-prep diet at 30 weeks out, and then you mass for 6 weeks, and then you get back, like they diet for the exact same amount of time.
Yeah.
It's just split, right? Like, so it should be fine.
It
But
should be easy.
I have found that too. Like it is difficult because I think like as you're obviously progressing towards fat loss, especially if you've started too fat or more fat than what you wanted to, and then they're getting to that look that they like, and it's starting to get better, and they're not really that fatigued, and then you're like, you don't need to be here anymore, and
Yeah.
then you put them back in, and then they're like, oh, I've only got like 2 months to get lean. You're like, yeah, that's fine because you're only 6 weeks out,
Yeah.
like realistically here. So I really like it if the person can really focus in hard on each segment, and they have to be you're right in that my demographic are pretty much they're always bodybuilders. I found like obviously as the demographic has gone more towards the pros that they're also far less fatigued coming into the back end of preps because they know what they're doing. They've done this before. We have really good communication. I can get them back into growing 4 weeks later, no problems. And then the pro like amateurs are exactly the same.
Yeah.
But yeah, like to shift that, like, hey, now you're going into this massing, but you actually don't need a lot more food is kind of a bit funny for people too, because they're like, I'm kind of feel like I'm still dieting. I'm like, you are, but you're not,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
I do like them.
Ties back quite nicely that comment on the food side of things and the post show mass because again that same mindset issue is also a problem in that post show window. It's like, hey, do you know how much I've actually got to do to you to actually get you growing again? Like it's not a lot. You've had such a high sensitivity to training stimulus where volume's been back at a recoverable amount. adding 1 or 2 extra sets as just straight sets with no intensifiers is going to have novel effect. It's going to drive stimulus. You don't need to be jumping back into bloody drop sets, rest pause sets, cluster sets, and all these fancy things. Training should be very simple still very low in volume, just a little bit more, 10%, you know. What would you think then in a post-show mass is, or maybe differentiate, I guess, phases up, the recovery phase for you in weight gain, and then also what that would then be in an expectation for a post-show mass compared?
Yeah. So this is one reason why I like the 4-week delay too, because it takes some of the dirt out of the water. It's very clear to me what's happening when I make, specific changes at specific time points. So like if I was to take someone from dieting, maybe they hit maintenance for peak week, weight comes up a little bit, and then I was just to go, let's just go straight into massing. If there was a calorie escalation and even a simultaneous drug escalation potentially, or even drug maintenance, I personally find it like, I'm not really sure. And then there's also the consideration as to whether or not the client is like accurate with their food intake now that they're post-show. I have some nervousness around how good that can be done, or how effective that can be done. Yeah. Whereas let's just say, I was under the assumption that someone's perceived deficit was 1,000 calories, right? Day one post-show, I don't want them to maintain their weight, but I want them to start to escalate marginally. I will usually kind of look at 2 or 3 kilos on a glycogen fluid, gut weight, all this sort of stuff. So cool. Let's just say someone started at 90. 93 kilos is going to be stable, right? Now I might say, all right, when he started dieting, I was happy with this condition at 100. There's 7 kilos difference there. He's probably lost about 7 kilos of fat. I don't need that back on, that's for sure. And what I've tried to do each time with most of my guys year by year by year is they actually progressively stay a little bit leaner and a little bit leaner and a little bit leaner as they get bigger and bigger and bigger. So the dieting becomes easier. So I might be like, cool, I'm willing to then take back maybe 50% of that, 2 or 3 kilos over the next couple of weeks. And if I set the calories to adjust for that, and I see weight stability by week 4, I know that I'm pretty much at maintenance for where I need them to be. If I then tick in drugs and weight goes up, I don't give a fuck how much they gain. That's the beauty of that approach. I have one of my guys, he's like, man, I just keep gaining weight. I put on 2 kilos this week. Isn't this too fast? I'm like, yes, but your calories are definitely not in a surplus. You're at maintenance at best. So I don't care. Next week, 2 kilos. Are you sure? Yes, I don't care. Another 2. Yes, man, I'm good. So for me there, it's really easy. After that, it really just becomes, I suppose, this is a shit answer for people. It's more of a visual skill set as to what I'm really looking for, body fat accumulation and some telltale signs for each client. Each client has their bit, lower back or glute or whatever it may be.
That was a reason for me asking you, because I knew there would be some sort of a more constructive boundary of number that you'd have in your head around certain percentages. I think the way that I look back on it, I guess for people listening, would be anywhere up to 50% of the weight you've lost in that prep could realistically be regained in a recovery phase. So post-show mass could be that and then some, another 10 to 25% on top of that during the actual whole phase. Not in, if we looked at it from a week-to-week perspective, the majority, I'd say the 75% of that 50% would probably come in the first couple of weeks.
100%, yeah.
Yeah. It's going to bump up nicely quickly, glycogen, fluid change, digestive weight, etc. But for me, that difference there then is, like you said, that I'm using a lot of qualitative assessment, because I'm usually jumping into post-show masses straight away. I'm looking at people 3 times a week for the first 4 weeks of their post-show masses, so I can keep track of how that fat change is happening and if it's appropriate.
Yeah, I'll be definitely twice a week for at least that period of time. The one thing that's tough for people is there has to be an option though, where you look at it and you go, you know what, man, you're actually still very lean, and you're still in great shape. So let's not stop these calories. Jared Hall's a great example at the moment. He his weight for show was around about the sort of 105 to 106ish sort of range. And he's like, I think I want to exist at around about 110. I was like, I think that's doable, and then we put his food up and he was fine. And then he gained a little bit and gained a little bit. And then he was 111. He had a little bit more food and he was 113 and a half. He's like, man, I'm like, dude, you're still in great shape, So then we just made sure, based on historically what I knew his maintenance was, and I'll do this based on calories per kilogram, right? I'm looking at his calories, I'm looking at his intake, and I'm like, dude, your calories per kilogram right now cannot be in a surplus for what your current body weight is. And you still look fantastic at 113 kilos. So we need to shift the narrative. 110 is no longer the goal. It's too little for you. it's just too little. And he was the same. It took him a couple of years. Like, man, I still look fucking good. Like,
Yeah.
how is this happening at 113 kilos? I'm like, it is what it is. Just let it be. But I think these objective numbers are like a really nice reference point. So like that's where I will use them in these like rebound phases. Like most of the time, I'm giving guys like somewhere around that 35 to 40 times body weight calories. It usually isn't more, but these are guys that maybe have done 45 and 50 times calories in the past for like the peak off seasons.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and it's probably a sad reality for people to realize, but like the leaner you stay, the bigger you get, the more repetitive this function happens, and the more accurate you are post show with food. And then the escalations are done well. Most of my guys are eating less calories per kilogram at the peak of their like most amount of muscle weight years in than what they were in the beginning. You know?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'd say that's
They also
absolutely.
don't diet down quite as hard either. Like
Yeah.
the range is just much smaller now.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I completely agree. It's exactly what I'm seeing with some of my guys that have been with me years now and are slowly seeing that second and third preps coming up on the journey. Like, oh, fuck yeah, I can actually notice this difference now. Not eating anywhere near enough of that peak level of mass, holding way better composition, but also dieting in a much more outside perspective, sustainable position. Obviously, that it's relative and it still sucks ass, but it looks and feels a lot better in actual amount of food going in.
Mm. Yeah, I think anytime that you can minimize the like degree of excursion from like what you've been doing, the easier it becomes, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and certainly, like I think is the case, like you mentioned before, I think is a really important one. Like all of the more stuff is typically needed when you're trying to like go from something that hasn't occurred before to something that's new. So like prep, you need less training. You typically need less drugs. At the back end of prep, you certainly need less volume and less effort to sustain, you know, like if you really want to come in healthy. So then when you get out of this into this massing phase, it's like my thought is always like, how little can we do and get more on at the moment, you know? Can I train them 4 days a week, 40 sets a week and see if they grow? Yep, cool. So then when that stagnates, what do? Add another day. And then when that stagnates, add intensifiers, like there's always like this like opportunity to pull another thread. And I think some people get too caught up on saying, I need to go now, forgetting that they also still want to keep going for another 3 months or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Are your massing phases post-comp like generally like a rough guide for length, like for you?
So look, the prep itself, because it's an extension of prep, I do have an opinion that it shouldn't be going on too long. This is a phase that is, unless like you get some random, like very fortunate client, Kai, for example, my young guy, the guy,
His rebound's fucked up. Let me just throw that out there.
yes, we don't look at Kai as the standard you should expect. That is a very much N equals one genetic, very, very, very good genetic potential, plus nailed every variable to the point it's almost nihilistic. Like the behaviors have been so 1% monotonous. It's been phenomenal to watch for someone so young to have that kind of mindset. My thing is making sure we keep on top of it and control it, obviously. But again, like this extension of prep, Kai was different because he got to the end of this kind of normal time frame, which I'd say is no more than 8 to 12. If we get past 8 to 12, we're basically just doing the off season now, and you've not really spent time afterwards. Maybe not physiologically necessary, but psychologically, I think you're missing off on a big thing, not having that suppressed time under the curve. After prep, drop it down a bit. I always train it to clients as watering the other plants in the garden. Bodybuilding is this massive fucking tree that absorbs a lot of nutrients, and the other plants, they die out for a little bit. We got to rewater them. Relationships, friends, whatever it is. So if you just feel like, yeah, health-wise, I can keep going, that's great, but don't miss off on this. This is also very to freshen up. 8 to 12 weeks, I find, because we are accumulating stress again. Like if we're going into a mass, we are then recurring fatigue. That's going to start increasing, and thus we are extending prep's level of fatigue. At some point within that at 6 to 12 weeks, I'd say with most of my guys average, within that 6 to 12, we're hitting a deload and they're feeling pretty ready to fucking call it and jump into a recovery phase. That's usually my go, I'd say.
Do you find it difficult to have them get out of it then at 8 weeks?
No, I usually,
as in like they want to keep going.
I have had this issue in the past, and how I navigate it now is this is a sealed combined deal. This is like a meal deal. You buy one, you get the other. So I'm selling it to them straight away with whether you like it or not, we're doing a recovery phase. How long that is dependent on some specifics for you, but there is going to be one. Now you can either do it now, get into your off season, or we can enjoy potentially some fun in a post-show mass, and then you're doing it. Whether you like it or not, that is happening. So if you take that, that's the deal.
Yeah. See, I think like it's a great opportunity for somebody who is just mentally fatigued to like have a little bit of flexibility and freedom back in. Like, because like maybe you can give them slightly more calories and a little bit more freedom, as long as they don't take the piss, because that's obviously when shit goes south, like the rebound turns into fucking whatever that turns into, an absolute shambles.
A
But
full
it's the reason I was asking, man, is because like I would say that I will get a minimum of 12 weeks out of my first massing phase post 4 weeks of recovery.
Yeah.
Right? Minimum, maybe maximum of 16. So I'm in the 12 to 16 range 4 weeks post. You're in the 0 weeks post 8 to 12. It's the same,
Exactly the same. It's just here or there.
But I think the difference here is that I think like for my guys, there's less need to go now. And there's more of this, like you said, it's a very controlled, like, okay, physically, I know I've just pushed the limits for training. I've competed a few times back to back because this is also a pro thing that's a little bit more for a lot of the amateurs. There's usually travel involved and a few other things. Even just the pressure of success in the pro division, I think, is obviously greater. So then it's like, just breathe for a little bit, 4 weeks, then we go. But we're going to go for 12 weeks. And I'm still pretty like, I'm certainly not like rigid on it, but like I don't like to push that first mash phase beyond 12 to 16, 12 to 14 weeks either, because I just love getting them out of that first growth phase in such a fantastic position for the next one. And I think like the more you can learn to like cut your losses or that's probably not even that, like
wins.
grasp your wins maybe, yeah, and be okay with like winning maybe. If you wanted a basket of eggs that had 12 in it and you got 11, like you better to have 11 and start again than you are to try and go for the 12th and smash them all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But yeah, it's pretty similar.
Yeah, no, I think another thing within the pro ranks as well that people obviously would probably logically assume there is a higher risk typically being taken amongst other things within that space. With most of them, not necessarily your guys' team, but just as a generalization for pros, there is an assumption that they are taking more drugs, that they are pushing things harder and for longer, inherent to the reward. So typically on some of those preps, like you've done 3 or 4 shows, is the luxury there to extend this level of stress on the body physiologically, mentally? Probably not in these cases. But the amateur who's done one show, have at it. Probably still fresh.
And also probably young, and maybe even earlier in the game where they haven't used as much shit as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing too is like the pro division is like, by virtue of being larger individuals, sometimes I think the bridging and health phases are by default an escalation compared to a lot of other people's too, because the ability to sustain that amount of tissue for an ongoing period of time, like I don't think a pro can really. You hear a pro saying, "I do nothing." I go back, I take nothing post show. I'm like, for 4 weeks, like, and then you don't go. This is what typically happens in the traditional pro ranks for people that are like thinking about like, oh yeah, I saw that Samson takes 0. I'm not going to use Samson as an example because I know nothing about his drug protocols, but just you see these things commented. Yeah, they didn't pin anything for 4 weeks, and then they went from 0 back to the top, and then they were at the top for 12 weeks, and then they didn't pin anything for 4 weeks, and they went straight back to the top. Whereas we might be like, oh, you're going to pin a little bit for 4 weeks, and then we're going to steadily escalate back to the top. Yep. So I think people can sometimes forget to look through the weeds of what is being said.
When you see an individual of that stature and size who's progressed over the course of 10 years to 300 pounds, if you believe that their maintenance PEDs are TRT and not a gram of gear during their maintenance, we might be a little bit far gone. There's usually an escalation that comes alongside that, because if you actually see a pro bodybuilder go on true TRT after their career's finished, what happens? They still train, they still eat, but
they magically get smaller.
somehow, almost by magic.
Yeah. But that's the fun of it, and it's even the same for the dieting, man. They go from 0 to 100 on that too. It's just a very different old school approach. Like, this is why they still do cheat meals and all the rest of it. It's just fucking 0 to 100 and then 100 down to 0, and just hang on for dear life. I'd be interested. I mean, this is a bit of a segue. Actually, before we get into that, so do you have any like more like tangible things that you will do for people post show then in regards to like how are you adjusting calories? Like, how do you determine the first calorie adjustment?
So similar in your conversation, I would be looking at what I estimate to be the perceived deficit of where they were, or if they had been fortunately eating into maintenance calories, which would be ideal coming into peak week, then, maybe that's perfect leverage off. I would then estimate deficit to calculate a maintenance, whether that's 500 or 1,000 calorie increase based on what the number showed me. And then I would look to increase that 200 to 400 on top of. That would
Yeah,
be the
cool.
start of my post-show mass. I'd make the calculated estimation to where the deficit was, and then I'd add a small percentage, 10 to 20% on top of that to start the surplus.
Mm. And assuming their PD load, drug load was like at a reasonable dose, does that escalate in this period, or is it
Depends on what
stabilized now?
my reasonable and your reasonable are probably very different.
Who knows? It
No,
depends on what it is for each person.
needs are obviously higher. No.
Yeah.
No. So look, for me, I would never at the back end of comp, as just a rule for me, unless in certain contextual situations, elevate PEDs higher than they had been during the prep. So for most people, they are typically exploiting close to the whatever perceived max tolerance is for these younger amateurs. Maybe they've worked up to 600. You're not really going past 600 in the prep. So in the mass, I'm unlikely to push them up higher. There's not going to go up higher. They probably can, but until I've got that black and white with them, I'm largely never going to. If I've got a more experienced competitor who's done higher in his off season and has run way higher and has been very healthy with lab assessment echoes and calcium scores and whatever else, then maybe I'd be open to, as long as we've removed the more acute toxic and stressors out, then maybe we could bump it up a couple of hundred to closer to that position. But they would never be too far in striking distance within that capacity, like 25% less than their peak in off season, roughly on the prep scenarios. The main thing for me, it's just compound selection and adjustment, just making sure that every single stressor that could be applying any acute damage or negative to the systems is removed. So orals and just stricken back to just injectables again, of creating the good balance of a bit more estrogen than maybe we were pulling down at the back end.
Mm-hmm. Any other modification to non-androgenics?
I'm very hesitant on the insulin front. I see a lot of people in the post-show window get very excited, start ramping their insulin back in, especially basal, which question mark. I don't want that 24-hour uptick in nutrient assimilation. You're going to get fat very, very quick, in my opinion.
I also just think like you're insulin sensitive already. Like I just don't see the point. It's also one of my icks at the moment with the whole fucking whether you want to mitochondrial shit, whether it's peptide stuff, whether it's small molecule stuff that everyone's like, I need to do this for insulin sensitization. I'm like, motherfucker, like you've got no fat on you. You're fine,
Do you know what the best marker public is for knowing if your insulin resistance is not completely correct and like 100% accurate, but just look at your body comp. If you're fucking lean, there's a good chance you're insulin sensitive and you're in a good spot.
Yeah.
Good chance.
Yeah. Growth hormone?
Growth hormone, I would maybe be inclined if the client wanted to say, hey, look, I want to open up the next door. I want to push a bit harder. Maybe they don't use growth hormone. They want to introduce it. I think that could be a wonderful time frame to leverage a novelty within the stack design, or maybe push it a little harder should they want to. But I'm very, very lack of change in other areas. I also would agree here on the peptide space and the amount of people that are recommending retatrutide for insulin sensitivity in an off season. I want GI transit as quick as possible right now and as efficient as it can be. I do not want to be slowing this down just for the sake of what metformin or chromium could sort out, or just doing a diet could probably sort out.
Yeah, not get fat, maybe do some cardio. All of it. You know what else helps your mitochondria? Not being lazy.
Cardio really is great for your mitochondria. And also, if you're going to use all of these things and not do the cardio, and you're not going to have appropriate nutrient intake and oxidative stress management, this is all pointless.
Yeah. No, actually, I'm glad you not mentioned, but referred to the growth hormone. I don't mind it, to be honest. I think like creating environments for maximum success to me is always something that I think is fantastic. And if there's ever a time to have an environment where like maybe impeding lipogenesis a little bit might be advantageous, it's one of those. And also maybe like helping a little bit with sleep. It's one of those. Like it's a really interesting and good time. Plus it's also, I think, like an opportunity to spend more time with some slightly greater exposure that builds some more background machinery for the time that these anabolics then start to re-kick again. So I actually think it's a nice one to leverage.
I don't mind rapid insulin. I think that is extremely a contextual thing based on the individual in front of me, because I have some clients, Dean, that don't pull rapid insulin out until they're 6 weeks out because of their food, how high their food demand is, and just actually trying to make use of it in the training windows. If they're still eating 200 grams of carb pre-workout, like fuck me, there's probably going to need some support there to get that in.
Yeah. That's cool. So calories we covered. What about in this post-massing? I imagine like they're at the back end of prep, maybe some of their output measures have already like decreased, like cardio and stuff like that. So that's probably just going to be maintenance.
I would keep it pretty consistent to wherever I deemed appropriate for the end of prep. If they're still got a few cardio sessions in per week, which most of mine would, they might drop it on like peak week itself. But if they were doing it prior, I'd probably reintegrate that again and then use that as a behavior to slowly reduce if I needed to, or
Mhm.
maybe in any way I wanted.
I like that. What about thyroid in this? Should somebody be using exogenous thyroid to sustain metabolic health? I
Why
should
come
say
off?
metabolic function. Yeah.
Why come off?
Yeah.
This is a valid question I've always asked, is that if we've got very good research that can back people that were misdiagnosed, I can't remember what the specific condition was, but misdiagnosed and using T4 wrongly for 20 odd years, that can stop taking it and restart their thyroidal axis, become euthyroidal in 14 to 21 day average. Like to me, it's just a case of going, you're probably not getting a huge benefit from using it long term, but I also don't see a major negative. And the trade-off for me would be that potentially we create, in the same way we do a better environment for dieting, we can kind of create a more stable and slightly more efficient environment for growing, in which personally I have seen my food not go anywhere near as high in off seasons when I've just maintained replacement thyroidal exogenously. The whole time that stayed consistent, my food did not go up to 6, 7K to try and reach that point. It stopped at 5.2, and I was in a better position and arguably better nick. Um, is there leverage of improvement here? Like, is there any benefit here? Well, you're not taking super physiological thyroid, and if you are, then there's prior conversations we should be having before we get to this point. And if you're just replacing it, I would just keep it stable the whole way through post show and recovery. I would also wait until, if they're going to remove it and there's someone who wants to get rid of it, last kind of point of recovery phase when everything's kind of normalized and we are stable and we've got the opportunity to allow for some flux and changes in those 3 weeks, then yeah, do it right at the end when things are stable. But I would, if they're not, if they're going to take it out, keep it the whole way through until that phase at least.
Yeah, dude. It's another vector of uncertainty that you don't need to fuck with.
No.
Especially because, like you said, like if someone said to me, "Oh, like I don't need this now, right?" I'm like, "Well, no, or maybe not. I don't know. Like you probably don't, but like it's going to recover within the same time frame, whether you take it out tomorrow or you take it out in 10 weeks. But we can minimize the noise in our data collection here by not having to deal with potential like rebound hypothyroidism. So like, why would we do this? So like, I like that concept too. I mean, I think I'm of the opinion, like if I don't have to give someone a drug, then I probably won't. Or I would like rather not have to, because it's just another thing, like, because man, to be honest, I'll probably tell you now, man, like, what would be my percentage? My percentage of T3 use for my clients now is pretty fucking low.
Yeah,
But only, I'll say this, only because they've got me the blood work that suggests that they don't need it, in air quotes, and they're not suffering from a dieting condition that is problematic to their like performance health, and their mental health and their daily energy, in that they're still consuming sufficient calories to feel okay. If anyone was tanked, felt shit, energy was low, and everything points towards metabolic maladaptation to the point where this would probably make this easy for you, fucking 100%, they were going to have that conversation. But the only reason why is just, I think this is, again, like this elongation now of like these clients that I've had for 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 years, where we've massaged them into this like optimal, I hate that fucking word, but into this like most appropriate scenario. And I have actually, this has happened on multiple occasions now. Clients started with me 4 years ago as an amateur. They probably used thyroid T4, T3. They probably used clenbuterol up to like 80 micrograms maybe. They also probably might have used a bit of tren. They may have also used stanozol. They may have also used this, insert X drugs. And then it's like 3 years in, they're like, "Hey, dude, am I going to get thyroid for this prep?" I'm like, "We'll see." Like, "Oh, but we'd used it last prep." I'm like, "That's cool. You're not the same person. This isn't the same environment." And then like slowly but surely, because they've just done so well in their off seasons, or growth seasons is more appropriate language, we've just not had to like leverage that stuff. So, the better you are today, the better you'll be tomorrow. It's pretty fucking simple.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, T3 is not. It's the only time I use thyroids is in replacement. Essentially, realistically, I think that's my only place I see efficacy for it. And if you do need T3, that's decided upon labs. And sometimes, like you said, if you're checking labs toward the back end, you can see maladaptation. You can see a reason for perhaps a need to supplement more T3 and to keep them in a more optimal, for sake of a better word, region, right?
Mm.
For sure. But then also, again, if I'm seeing labs toward the back end and there's an issue with T3, but the T4 is fine and it's been great all along, then I'm probably thinking there's more of an issue I need to address anywhere
Well,
elsewhere.
man, dude, that's actually a good asterisk, right? I had a client of recent times, fucking like 6, 7 weeks out, in really good spot. Food, fantastic. We know that their replacement T3 typically wouldn't go over like 25 to 32 micrograms, maybe, But we pulled labs, and T3 was like at 3.5. And then I was like, all right, that's okay. Like everything though suggests that we're fine. Don't worry about it. This was at like 8 weeks out, actually. Sorry. And then at like 6 weeks out, we pulled them again, and it was still like a bit there. And we're like, normally you would sit higher. Let's just tick that T3 up to like 37.5, and weight was lost, as you would expect, for no improvement in the look the entire time. The look actually just kind of got a little bit smaller and a little bit flatter, and the thyroid actually didn't change like in the numbers again. But we knew historically that he'd never really ever gone to that before. But the labs kind of were like, we're both like just umming and ahhing, like maybe we should. And now in hindsight, retrospective, we're like, we'll never do that again. We'll just never, ever go beyond 25. Like, and if you have to suck down on food, too fucking bad. It works better for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always found that T3 is a bit of a double-edged sword. Like and I would do it back in the day, back when it was more bro science, back when it was the earlier years. T3 was always an application as a lipolytic, and it just, I've seen it on my physique, I've seen it myself. You fade, you start to lose muscle. It doesn't usually end well, in my opinion.
Dude, I don't know how a fun. I think I've told this before in here. Maybe I haven't, but my first ever prep, I certainly was not well versed in drugs to the point where I could make decisions on my own. So I had a friend of mine say, hey, dude, can you certainly help me with this, And it was a very like old school. It's like, oh, we're going to put a little bit of tren in. Because we're going to put tren in, there's some interference potentially with thyroid, so we'll put in T3 as well. Cool, done. And I got to like 3 weeks out, and I remember thinking like, man, I want to be a bit more peeled. And I was having this conversation with him in the car. I was like, dude, like, I can't remember what my T3 was at the time, but I'm like, I want to get more peeled. He's like, how are you dealing with the dieting? I'm like, look, I'm pretty fucked up. Like, I'm tired, But he goes, you have two options here. I know you want to use the least amount of drugs, but you can either escalate thyroid, or you can escalate output, or you can decrease input. Like, if it was me, I'd probably just play with the drugs, and I wouldn't fuck around with your food. And I was like, all right, let me think about it. And then Liz and I spoke about it. We're like, yeah, all right, let's do the thyroid thing. Man, I was at 120 micrograms of T3.
Ooh.
I don't know how like in hindsight, I'm like, how was I not cooked? Maybe I was.
Was it just one dose?
I can't remember, man. It was a while ago.
I would have had anxiety to the point I would have jumped off a bridge.
Yeah, like, but I actually think I'm pretty immune to negatives. One of the lucky ones in that. But I was like, dude, I can't imagine. I just can't imagine. Like, and it was Cytomel, dude. There's no way it was dodgy.
Yeah, good. Old school as well. Purple, brown, and white package with the light.
Tiny little fuckers too. Anyway,
good times.
If we missed anything for the post-show mass, mate?
Covered drugs, covered food. Supplements are pretty standardized to whatever the person's taking. I think psychology, I guess, was the only real thing we didn't necessarily dive into, but I think it's very contextual to the person. Just think realistically, younger kids, more impatient kids than the young men and women that I guess would maybe apply for me as a coach. Just think about the sacrifices that prep costs in the outside world: work, friends, relationships, family, significant other, relationship with yourself as well, and the other things that light your soul on fire. You will bury yourself very quickly into the floor before the off season's even begun by not just giving yourself 5 minutes to be you. Just because the next bodybuilder who stepped on stage next to you has jumped into a rebound mass and is 10 kg up and looks sick. Don't get caught up in what other people are doing. Just do what you need to do for yourself. And that means keeping this and this in a good spot.
Yeah, I think getting carried away with the mass is certainly one thing. Like, the rate of gain is only, like you said, I think if the rate of gain is like beyond what you would ever imagine, then it's probably too fast. I'll also say this as a quick little adjunct. You don't typically notice body fat that you accumulate on your skull. You don't notice it in your armpits. You don't notice it on the inside of your knee. And all of these little places will fill up quick. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, you'll be much fatter than what you thought you were, despite the fact that you're 10 kilos up and still looking really, really good. So recognize that there's a period where you're going to, like, it's like the rate of it's almost like the hormesis response to supplements. Like, a little bit more is good, a little bit more is good, and then it hits this bit, and then all of a sudden it gets worse. It's the same in the rebound, a little bit is good, a little bit, and then eventually you're going to get fat. So you're better off pulling up short in the rebound, especially if you're going to go straight off day one, than you are to go the other way. But it doesn't mean that it's an excuse to also like go ham at all costs.
Yeah.
Like, 10 kilos in week one ain't it.
I had two live examples of that direct comparison because I had a conversation with Blake. Shout out Blake Dan Chisholm, my absolute giant 6'4" fucking classic guy. Looks like Tarzan with his long hair. Blake had this exact scenario on the comparison and the difference because him and Kai both competed the same season, and both him and Kai were in rebound masses because they were both very healthy. Blake was very hard to get moving, dude. Obviously, with him being a taller, much bigger person in stature, just feeding that guy and trying to keep that balance between too much fat gain, too much weight gain was a very interesting concept. And it took us about 4-6 weeks before we'd really got some momentum built with it. And he started to see some good progress. But Kai had obviously jumped out the gate and within 4 weeks was like 12 kg heavier and peeled still. That comparison, he was like, what's different? What are you doing differently with him? Nothing. I'm taking just as much caution as I always do with how far we run this as I am with him, as with you. That is just the difference between the pair of you right now.
Yeah.
Relatives are the same. The percentages for your food, percentages food in those calculations, all the same thought processes. Still very cautious week by week, but just that's the difference in growth potential.
Was there a significant difference in the degree in which they had to push calories low to get lean, relatively speaking?
Yeah, Blake had to suffer.
Even more, okay.
Yeah, Blake.
I also think, man, I think one interesting phenomena for post show. I also find, still to this day, I'm always like not perplexed by it, but intrigued by it. Is the degree in which you can feed somebody in the final 2 weeks to get them to a look and not see tremendous weight gain, compared to the amount of food that they need to continue gaining weight post show, despite the fact that everything prior to the show indicates they're going to be able to handle a ton of food. Ryan's a really good example of this, actually. Like, weight barely moving on significant food consumption in peak weeks, and then moderate calorie intake post show, 1.5 kilos, 2 kilos, 1.5 kilos. Like, he's like 97 kilos, and he's like, dude, what's happening? And I'm like, for one, glycogen's now saturated. There's a different degree there, but there's also the after show. There's less of the fucking like ADD movements and nervousness and stress, and the sleep's not fucked up anymore. So they're actually getting a full night, and like all of the positives come in, and then the food is better for less. So I think like that can be a bit of a fuckery for some people too, to see weight gain on little food. So they think they're going to be able to eat tons.
I really think a lot of underrepresentation or just lack of appreciation for how much subconscious movement and energy the body uses. It always surprises me just how much your body can slow down the deficit without doing anything that you feel conscious. Like your body's just hijacking that. And in the same regard, once that flips, yeah, it's big time. You don't realize how much you stop moving. Like for me, definitely, like even through the podcast, people watching this will see my chair don't stop. It does not stop moving. I'm always doing something. I'm always fidgeting. But the minute I'm in a deficit, it just does not move. Like the body is still as anything.
Yeah, but it's also even reverse, like the hyper-stressed individual in a prep who's like energy inefficient, They are the literal example of burning through fuel inefficiently, so like you feed them more and they actually get not very much out of it. And like there's a landmark study for this, even in regards to like that there's about 1,000 calorie swing with regards to people's tolerance to a surplus. Give one person 1,000 calories, they do less, they gain more. Give this another person 1,000 calories, they just do more and then burn the extra calories. And then there's someone in the middle too. So like all of these factors come into play when it comes to this like post-show phase too. And you have maybe a hyper energetic individual who just starts burning through the calories. Maybe you have another person who's like prior to that was just burning through calories because they're just fucking stressed all the time and the sleep is shit and all this sorts of stuff. So it's an interesting phase, but the numbers almost always work out.
Yeah,
it's the boring part of this coaching. There's a different manipulation of it all, but like if I give someone 35 calories per kilogram and they're gaining weight, it's not fat. If I'm giving someone 25 though and they're gaining weight, they're probably eating some extra food. Like there's ratios here that just don't fuck up.
Yeah.
Mate, any final comments for those that are listening?
Clients that think on that last thread that Dean said, it is not noticeable just because sometimes the coach does not always say immediately or bring it up directly there. Do not think you're pulling the wool over their eyes and do not think they are not seeing it, because believe me, they are. They're just waiting their time for when they need to say.
Yes, when you're not so emotional.
Yes, there is a time and a place, and it is coming.
Or we're figuring out a way for you to tell us.
Yeah, yeah. Or we're trying to get the talk to Jesus conversation happening.
This is the bodybuilder. I'm going to finish that. This bodybuilding rhetoric that irks me but makes me laugh every time, right? Information call with a client coming on board. Sweet, man. Tell me, what are your current drugs? They're like, my testosterone's around about 250 to 300. I'm like, cool. So it's 300.
Yeah.
Masteron's around about 700 to 800. So it's 800. I'm eating around 3,000 to 3,500 calories. So it's 3,500 calories. Listen here, motherfuckers. I know it's always the bigger one. It's like they know they don't want to say it. They're like, oh, I'm taking 1,000 megs of mass. They're like, I'm taking 900 feels better, up to 1,000. And it's like they can tell the truth after they've made themselves feel good.
Yeah, so anyway. Absolutely. We're not the same. We're all the same.
It's funny. Well, everyone, I haven't come up with any fun would you rathers for George today. And, I'm not a creative person. So you're going to have to go without. Anything else? I don't think so. Thanks for listening, guys. Give us a high five if you ever see us in person. Not that you probably will. No, 5-star review, like, share, subscribe. We've just had a couple of backstage videos and that all go out in the last few weeks too. So keep an eye out on those on YouTube. One just went live today, which will be like 3 days ago for you guys who are listening to this, on progressive overload, which was a cool one I did for my client Camille. So keep an eye out for those. And if you guys have any questions, as always, please reach out, inbox us. Much love.
Peace.